Welcome students to another video tutorial for client-side web development. My name is Todd Nash, and today we are looking at building the second stage of our developer portfolio page. So as students in the software development program, it's always important to make sure you have a portfolio built either on GitHub or even a self-hosted web page. GitHub also offers what's called GitHub Pages that you can use to host these files, and perhaps we'll look at that later on in another video. But for now, students will be tasked with building up their portfolio here, and we are using our existing code that we had in our first code lab with the Flexbox layout here, building a web page layout. Okay, so let's get started. I have provided students the markup and the CSS for the first code lab that we've done. So if you lost that or need that, please just have a look on Blackboard. And there's a few resources we do need to get started. And I'm just going to have that posted here, and just pause the video if you need to. But these are the items we're going to need today for the code lab. And we'll start with the first one. We're actually going to be using Font Awesome Icons. So this is a CDN, or Content Delivery Network. What it allows us to do is provide a link in the head of our project, and then we can use the icons in the project. The next link here is we're going to use Code Beautify. So this is an easy way, and I'll show you the interface. It's an easy way to insert code and have it properly indented in a single button click. So we're going to be using that just because as our code grows, we want to make sure it's easy to read and well organized. The third item on this list is lipsum.org. So we do use lorem ipsum Latin placeholder text just in our About Us or About Me section. So you want to have this website open, lipsum.com. We also want to be logged into GitHub because I have some assets that I need to share, particularly image assets. We use one image that I have hosted on there. And then finally, we should just have the WSchools editor. You could also do this project in VS Code, but I find that it's more open in the editor, the web editor here. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing we want to do is let's go to this Font Awesome link right here, and this will open this page, the CDNs. And what we want to do is we want to click on this, copy link tag, and we're going to come back to our project, and in the header, right after the closing style, we'll make some space. We're just going to put that link in there, okay, and then run it. What that allows us to do is now our project has access to the Font Awesome library. Oh, and I should mention that students also need the Font Awesome website open. Sorry, I should include that. So this is fontawesome.com, and we're going to actually be using some of the icons that that are on offer through the CDN. Okay, so have this website open as well. All right, so let's get started here. So we have the CDN in our head, and of course, in our head we have meta tags, we have the tab title, and we have some embedded styling from our previous project. Okay, so things are looking good so far, and now we have the CDN, which is a content delivery network where we can use Font Awesome icons. Okay. All right. So let's get started here. One thing I do want to change is some colors here, just because, in our page layout code lab, we kind of just decided on some colors just to distinguish the different sections of the page, but now we want to have colors that make sense for our content. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to this main selector, and we're just going to set the background to white using the hex code hashtag FFF, and you can see that has changed now. We also want to increase the padding in the main to 20 pixels. Okay, just to give it some spacing inside. And then we also want to set the height to 100%, okay, in the main. So that's the first thing we're going to do. Next is we're also going to change this link layout. So what we did, if you recall, is we actually gave the links here in the nav just some margin. So if we find the nav here, doesn't look like there's any margin here. Oh, right here. So we gave it some margin, and if we get rid of that and run it, you can see it'll all kind of clump together in the top left. Okay, but we're going to do something differently here, just because there's another way to organize the content that makes sense. So we're actually going to change this margin to 15 pixels, okay? And it's okay, it's clinging to the left side here. We're going to fix that, okay? All right. There's a few things we're going to change with this top header. So we are actually going to name this developer profile, okay? So let's do that. We're also going to change the tab title, so let's start with that. So developer profile, and in the header where it has the H1 with the ID logo, we're also going to change this to developer profile and run that. Perfect. All right, so things are looking good. The next thing we're going to do is change the header that we're operating on. Okay, so the color is good, but what I want to do is actually provide some depth. And what I mean by that is you could actually use box shadow to kind of give it a 3D effect off the page, an appearance where it looks like it's jumping off the page a little bit, if you will. So to do that, we need to add box shadow and some positioning. But first, we're actually going to set a display property to flex, because we're going to have actually a placeholder image before this H1. So we want to set it to flex, and that gives us access to the justify content and align items. So justify content will give us the ability to control where the items are, or the child elements are, in this in this header. And I should be in the header, not the container. So let me just back up here. So I want to start with the header, and we'll go justify content start. And what the start means is there's different settings you can do. Primarily, we've used justify content center, but when you place it at start, it actually will put it to the leftmost side, or the start, if you will. And next, we're going to do align item center, and this centers the items vertically on the page. Okay, so, and you can see if you run that, now this H1 is nice and positioned in the middle. So that's the effect that we want. Okay, so we're going to leave the background, and we're actually going to increase this height to 110 pixels. And we'll leave the width at 100% just because we do want it filling out the horizontal dimension of the page. But right after, we're going to add what's called a box shadow. Okay. So a box shadow will give us exactly that, a box shadow. And there's a few different values that we can kind of manipulate. The first is the sort of the x-axis. So you can control where the box shadow lands, in other words. So we're going to set the offset of the x-axis to 2 pixels. We're going to set the offset of the y-axis, so the vertical axis, to 2 pixels. We're going to set the intensity to 3 pixels. And finally, the color to gray. And if you run that, you won't actually see something. But and I'll explain that in a little bit, but let's just reiterate what we did. So we have the x offset, x-axis, okay, so the horizontal, we have the vertical or the y-axis, the intensity, and finally the color of the shadow, okay. So you can learn more about this in W3 Schools, but that's it for controlling box shadows. Okay, so you can have a box shadow that is only diffusing out vertically or horizontally, and then you can adjust the diffusion there. Okay. All right. The reason why we can't see it, and this brings us into a concept of the z-index property. Okay. So the z-index actually allows us to stack elements or position elements on top of each other. So the z-index will give us, and I'll show you what it looks like. So here we've set it to 1. What this means is anything that's set previously, so if we set another element to z-index 0, this header is going to have precedence or be stacked on top of that element set to z-index 0. And then if you set it to higher numerical values, that will give it even more precedence. But we actually have, for this to work, we have to set the position to relative. Okay, if we don't have that, the z-index property will not work. Okay, and the position property has all sorts of values you can use, like fixed, stuff like that. But for now, the most common one is relative. It just means, well, these elements are relative to each other, and now we have access to the z-index. Okay, so what are we providing this z-index in relation to? And the answer to that is the container right below it. So if you run this, you can see now we have this box shadow giving it a little bit of depth. Okay, so that's exactly what we want for the effect. Nothing too much, nothing too dramatic, just a slight little accent shadow there. Okay, perfect. So we're going to leave it at that. Okay, next is we have to do something with these links. And if you look at the aside, even we have no padding on the aside. So we're going to change that as well. But here we have a chaining of selectors, and we want to change that because we want to individually target the nav and the aside. So what we're going to do is actually break these up. So delete the nav part, and let's create a new entry for nav all by its lonesome, just so we can manipulate these individually. Because what we want to do eventually is make sure that these have different widths or flex basis widths, and so we want to be able to manipulate them individually. Okay. For the aside here, you can see that the text is clinging to the top, so we are going to set the padding to 20 pixels. And there we go. That's good. You can see the nav is collapsed just because we haven't set anything. And what we want to do is we're actually going to copy what's in the aside and we're going to paste it in the nav. Okay, so we want to use those properties, but we're going to set them to something different entirely. We're going to set the width basis to 17%, and we're going to leave everything else the same. So if you run that now, we have this, but we have some issues here because the links are, they're okay, but they're not positioned the way we want them to. And we're actually going to pare down these links as well. So let's go down to the links now. And what we're going to do in the HTML, what we're going to do is just highlight these links and make sure you don't delete the closing UL. And we just want 3 links here. So what we're going to do is right click and cut and just get rid of that extra space. And now we just want 3 links, because what we're going to do is we're going to have our GitHub profile here link. We're going to have a LinkedIn, and then we're also going to have a link to our interests. So we can actually start writing that out. So we can go GitHub, LinkedIn, and then finally just a link towards our interests. Okay, because again, we're in a developer profile, and we want to give access to our GitHub projects, maybe our professional LinkedIn page, and maybe some more info. Okay, but these links are just have the hashtag as the hypertext reference, so they're just going to be dummy links. They're not actually going to go anywhere. Okay. In production, though, you would have those going to separate pages or just ID targets on the same page. Okay. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to head into, well, I'm already into the HTML, but that's going to be our focus for now. Because what we want to do is we want to go into this main now, where it says this is the main content area, and we want to get rid of that placeholder text. And here we are going to just put an H2, so that's a text header element, and we are going, we're just going to write in the header about me, because this is going to be our about me section. Okay, and right below it we're going to have a paragraph tag, and just it's good to kind of format it before you do anything or add content. So I just created the opening and closing paragraph tags, and now at this point we're going to go to that website lipsum.com. I correct myself there, and we're actually going to grab some placeholder text. Okay, so if you scroll down on the page, it kind of tells you, the history behind it, where it's used, and so on. But what we just want is we're just going to grab this first paragraph, and this is all Latin. I'm not entirely sure what it is saying. I'm sure you can translate it, but for now we're just going to use that for placeholder, and we're going to paste that into our paragraph. Okay, and you can try and format it or tab it out, but it's going to appear that way. Just how it's formatted in the editor. Okay, and I'm getting rid of those spaces, and if you run that now, you can see that we have that placeholder text. So if this were your actual profile, then you'd want to make sure it's saying things about your yourself, right? All right. So next thing we're going to do is we are going to provide some padding. So if you look at the main, this title is just clinging right over the paragraph, so we can't have that. So we're actually going to go to the main selector in our CSS, and we're going to provide context, and we're going to select that H2 tab, and we're going to go padding 20 pixels, 0 pixels. And this is actually shorthand. So basically what I'm saying is this controls the top and bottom, and the second value is the left and right. So we have padding already on the main, so I don't need to provide any more padding. I just want padding on the top and bottom, and this is the shorthand selection. So you can actually go padding top and padding left and right and so on. But here is the shorthand. If you run that, you can see things are nice and spaced out now, so we don't have to worry about it. Okay, perfect. All right, so everything is looking spaced out. This footer here, we're actually going to change the background to a hex code, and this is EEE. And you can see it kind of lightens things up. Again, the background, we've just changed the footer background to this hex code value here. All right, and it looks good. So our colors are kind of making sense. They're not too hard on the eyes. They don't clash. They're not too bright where someone is put off by it. And things are looking good. Okay. The next thing we want to do is in our header, if you recall, we have set this display to flex, the content, justify content to start, which means it's starting on the leftmost side, and the align item center, which means vertically it's starting in the center. But what we want to do now is actually enter in our image, because this is our developer profile. So we want to have our image there. And what I've done is created a new GitHub repository for that. And it's just a placeholder image like so. And this is the link for it, okay? So what I want students to do is please maybe pause the video and copy this image in or write it out. And all you need, don't download it, you just need to copy the URL. And we're going to insert that image in the header. Okay, it's a kind of a long URL. It's probably a good spot to use a URL shortener, but for now, we're just going to use this raw link from GitHub. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is, if you recall from our tutorials, we're actually going to use a figure tag. So if you recall what that is, a figure will have an image inside it as well as a sort of a fig caption. And we're going to have that right before this H1 in the header. So let's make some space, and I'll just show you the syntax here. So first we have an opening and closing figure tag. Next is we actually have the image. So we're going to go image, the source attribute, and we're going to paste in that link that I described here. So this is my repo. This is the raw link to the file. And we're going to have that closing tag. And if you run it, see we have this big photo here. The placeholder, which we're going to resize. It's just kind of taking over things. Okay. We're actually going to give it an ID of profile picture. So that's the attribute is profile picture. And the last part of this is the fig caption. And this is just the text that kind of hangs immediately below the image. And you're going to just put your name in there. Okay. And for now, it looks kind of funny, but we are going to apply CSS styling to that. Okay. And maybe just close things off like so. And I'm just going to add some indenting there. Okay, so we have our figure here, we have our image and the fig caption. Now we need to style these things or add some dimensions to this profile picture just because it's kind of out of control. So we want to kind of put it by the header just because it is a header element. And we can even go further and start having comments here, just demarcating the different sections of the page. Okay, but now we need to target this profile picture and add some dimensions just because it's way too big. And we've given it an ID in camel case of profile picture. Okay, so we're going to give it a width of 83. Okay, and I think that's a PNG image. So 83 pixels, and then a height, explicit height of 80 pixels. We give it those dimensions just because it is round, and you can see once we run that, it has tamed that. Okay, but we also want to give it a border radius. Actually, you know what? We don't even need to give it a border radius. It looks like it is good. Okay, so we'll just leave it at that. But you can see the header is still kind of out of whack. This figure is not in alignment, and I think once we do that, it should be good. So we're just going to select the figure tag. So that's a element selector, and we are going to go text align because it is text, and we're going to set that to center. And we're also going to give it a margin left of 30 pixels, okay? Because it's clinging to the left side there. And if you run that, there we go. It looks good. Everything is centered, both horizontally and vertical, and we have it to the left side just as a style preference, just because typically users will look at the top left of the screen once they land on a web page or website. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we have this aside. Now, in prior tutorials, in the aside, and let's go down to the aside in the HTML, let's highlight this placeholder text, delete it, and let's give it some space. So in prior tutorials, we've dealt with block quotes. So block quotes, exactly that. They wrap text in sort of a block that's indented, and we can even go further and just wrap text in Q tags or quote tags. And basically, an aside is supporting the main focal point, which is this About Me section. And all we're going to have here is quotes from or references from our employers, and essentially we just make this up. So what we're going to do is have a block quote, opening tag, closing tag, and inside this block quote we are going to have the Q tag, opening and closing. Okay, and I'm just going to write a little blurb or a little quote that's made up. So for instance, Todd worked great in our development team, highly recommend. Okay, all right, and basically that's just a quote from maybe one of our references or employers. You would use your own name there, and we're going to leave it at that. Okay, the next thing is we're going to insert BRs or line breaks, because right after these I'm going to just put in some markup, and we're going to use EM tags. If you recall what that does, it just kind of italicizes content, and now I just want the name or even the position of the person saying that. Okay, so in this case I just made up Google engineer. Okay, and if you run that, you can see on the right side in the aside it appears as a block quote with these quotation marks around them, and then we have the reference or the site of the individual that has made this quote. Okay, and so our block quote is actually done. So that's good, but we're not going to stop there. We're actually going to copy this and we're going to paste that because we want 2 block quotes. And keep in mind, we're working in a congested or tight environment, so things might look congested, but you can adjust that. Okay, the next block quote, I'm just going to write, helped develop our UI, so user interface, user experience for the platform ... And this time I'm just going to make up a fake website, and this is going to be techmogul.com. Okay. All right. And you can see if you run that now. Okay, and I'll just give students a few minutes. You can pause the video if you need to look at just the markup there. but you can see we have some good looking output, and I'm actually going to put a line break in between the quotes just to give it some space there. Okay, so now we have some references that are available to the person's looking at our profile. Okay, so they know immediately, hey, this person has references. Okay, people have good things to say about you. All right, but we're going to change this up because we have on the nav side the same color, and we want to kind of do things differently. So what we're going to do is we're going to go right at the end of our CSS, and we're just going to target the block quotes. And we're going to set the background to this EEE, which is kind of like almost an off-white color. And we're going to give it some padding of 10 pixels. Okay, just like that. But we need to go more. So what's happening here is it looks good, but it's kind of clashing against this, this blue or this color behind it. So we're going to go up to the aside selector, and we're just going to set the color to white. Okay. All right, so it kind of gets rid of that, but I do want to have a border on the left side. And how to do that is you can have the border property and specifically choose the border dash left, and we'll go 1px solid and then the color. Okay, so if you run that, now we have that border delineating or separating the about me section from the quotes. So things are looking good. Okay. All right. The next thing I want to look at is this footer here, because we have nothing in the footer, and I do want to take advantage of that and put in our contact information. So if somebody is looking to hire us, I just want to be able to have that information ready. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a div, okay, and we're not going to give the div any names or IDs or classes. Okay, so we're just going to leave them as generic divs, and we're going to have two of them, so copy them out. One is for phone, so we're going to start with phone, and inside this phone we are going to have an anchor tag. Okay, and if you recall from our prior instruction, this anchor tag we can actually use it to open up a phone number app either in a mobile device or on the person's personal computer or laptop or tablet. Okay, and what that does, it just makes it a lot easier for somebody to start a telephone conversation. So the syntax is we have this prefix in the href attribute of tel, and then a lot of US phone numbers do require this +1, and we're just going to give it an example phone number. It's not real here, and you'll notice we don't include, and I'm going to copy that, we don't include the dashes. Okay, leave those out, but make sure you have the +1, and then in the label of the link we're going to put the dashes in. So this is what the user sees on the bottom here. Okay, and if you click that, it should open this phone link here. Okay, so that's working nicely. Next thing is, actually, you know what, let's copy this and let's just paste that down there, because what we're going to do is we're going to change this to email now, and we're going to say for the label myexampleemail.com. Oh, sorry, myexampleemail@gmail.com rather. And we're going to change this prefix to mail to. Okay, so that's for emails. And then you're going to copy this email and just throw it right after the colon. Okay, so that is the email anchor. Okay, that HTML provides us, and if you run that and look at the header, well, there's the email. If you click on it, it will open up the client. Okay, perfect. All right, but you'll notice that it's kind of clumped together. And we don't want to leave it at that because it doesn't look professional. So the next thing we're going to do is target the footer and make sure these items or these child elements are spaced out accordingly. Okay, so just make sure you have all this syntax. Pause the video if you need to. But we have two divs. Inside those divs, we have anchors or links. One is a telephone pad link. The other is an email link. Okay. All right, so let's go up to the CSS now, and we want to find the footer. So the footer here, we want to make sure is well laid out, and we can set this now to the flex property, the display flex. So display flex is really good for aligning items both vertically and horizontally, and just giving you that flexibility on the page in general. Okay, we're going to start with the justify content. And there's a value called space around. So this is sort of the horizontal aspect of that. If you run it, you can see it will add space around these elements, but notice that they're still clinging up there. So I can add padding or margin, but an easy way is just to add the align items property and center those out vertically. Okay, so if you run that, you can see our phone and email is now perfectly centered both horizontally and vertically. Okay, and that's exactly what we want. All right, so things are looking great for our developer profile. And the old saying goes is less is more, so you don't need to put a lot of bells and whistles. You can keep it nice and simple for the user, for the prospective employer, just to find out more information about you. Because again, content is king on the web, and it's not so much all the fancy bells and whistles. It's just you're informing someone of your technical expertise and some projects that you worked on and things like that. Okay, so we can leave it like that if you wanted to, but what I want to do is actually use some font awesome icons as indicators here on the left side in the nav. So we're going to do that next, and it's actually pretty easy. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to find these links. Okay, so here are these links in the HTML markup. Again, you can note that they're in the nav, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to wrap these anchor tags in spans. Okay, so spans are used when you want to include a lot of different items inside the same horizontal span, hence the name. So we're actually going to be adding some font awesome icons to this horizontal span with the link. So it's going to prepend these links. One thing we do need to do is actually get rid of these bullet points because they're actually in the way. We're going to have images or icons instead. So how we do that is if we go to our UL section and make some space, we're going to target just the UL, not the list items, and which is the parent element, and we're going to set the text decoration property to none. And if you run that, that's good. Oh, sorry, not the text decoration, it's the list style. We're going to set that to none. I'm thinking of links, okay? So if you run that, the list style, it gets rid of those default bullet points, okay? But we're not done because we also want to add a margin here. I noticed in the tutorial that we had some space. I want to get rid of it on the left. So I can target the margin left, but this time we're actually not giving it more margin. We want to decrease the margin. So you can actually have negative values, okay? And you can see if I don't need to use the space, I want to get rid of some of that, right? It looks a little funny now, but once we add the icons, it'll look great. Okay, so we're going to add a negative margin of 18 pixels on the left side. Okay, the next part of this is we're just going to add the the Font Awesome icons to the links. So if you recall earlier, we added the CDN to Font Awesome, and that gives us access to the icons. And the next part of this, and what you'll need now, is the Font Awesome search. Okay, go to the website, go to the icons, okay, and we're going to search for GitHub. So this is fontawesome.com, and you can see this is a free icon, and what we're going to do is just, if you click on this, we've copied the HTML, and that's all we need. You can see there's other tabs for other frameworks. There's even Unicode characters, and you can download the free icons. But we're just going to grab that, and inside the span, we're just going to pop that in there. And you can see, if you run that, now we have that GitHub icon. Next, we need to look for LinkedIn. And you can just click away, and we're going to find LinkedIn here. This is a free icon. We're going to copy the HTML, go back to our project, paste that in there and if you run it, you can see that. That's good. Next, for interests, I just use a light bulb. So let's find a free light bulb. All these pro ones are paid for, so we just want to choose either or. I'm going to choose this one, and we're going to pop that in there and paste that, Control V in there. Okay, and you can see now we have our icons, but we have some work to do just because they need to be bigger, and I do want to get rid of these underlines in the links. Okay, so how do we do that? Okay, so first we have to go to our nav. Okay, and we want to put like selectors or descendant selectors together. So I'm going to create a new selector called nav span, and that targets this span. There's 3 of them here. Okay, we want to add a flex property. I want to justify the content to start, so it goes to the leftmost side horizontally, and then I also want to align all the items, so both items in the flex vertically center. Okay, so if I hit that, you can see now things are nice and neat. We still have to provide some margining or padding there, but we're in a good spot. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to target the anchor tag, so nav A, because I want to get rid of these, the text decoration. So we'll go text decoration, none, run that. There goes the underline. The underline is default, and we're going to set the color of these links to black. And I'm just going to change the font size to 14 pixels, and also the font weight, so how thick the font is, to 300. Okay. And I'm just going to get rid of this extra space here. And if you run that, that's kind of the look I'm going for the A's. But we still have to target these icons because they're too small. Okay, so the next part of that is we need to go up to the UL, or wherever the UL list items are. So this is margin 15. The UL is good. And what I want to do now is I just want to make sure that this nav bar is kind of spaced out and looking good. So how do I do that? Well, what we're going to do is target this nav, and we've already set it to flex, but underneath that, I'm going to go justify content, space around, and you can see how often we use these flex properties. They're just really great to get things organized. Align items, we're going to go start, okay, and you can run that. Things are taking shape. And finally, I'm going to change the font family to Verdana. So we're actually going to change the font face to a different font type. apart from the rest of the default font type, which is Arial. Okay. All right, so that is the font that I'm looking for. You can see the text has grown and it's kind of more readable and unique, and that's exactly what I'm going for. Okay, still in the nav section, you can see we have all of our navs. This final selector is going to be targeting the icon, so nav I. So the icon can be selected through the I selector. And we're going to change the font size to 40 pixels. So if you run that, you can see these icons are now quite a lot bigger. And we're going to set the margin around them. So not, again, this is inside the span. It's not the margin of the anchors. It's the icons themselves. And if you click that, you can see things are nice and horizontally and vertically and space-wise professional looking. Okay, and that doesn't change when you close it. All right, so these are actual links that people can click on. They're dummy links, so they don't go anywhere, but in production, you would want them functional. Okay, and we're almost done, so good job. If you need to stop and pause at any of the instruction here, please do. And just figure out if it's not looking like this, any problems that you may have. Okay. The next thing is this is looking great, but I do want to change these icons colors. Okay, so the GitHub is actually black, so that's what their logo is styled as. But I want to actually select each item, each nav item. So let's go to the nav section, and we're just going to add new entries. So we're going to actually leave the first icon alone. And what I want to do is target the second child. So how do I do that? Well, I use the nth child pseudo property or element or class, right? So if I go navul li, okay, so this is inside the nav. This is inside the unordered list, and this is a list item. But how do I select the nth item? Well, I go colon nth child, and then I put in the number that I want selected, in this case the second child here, so the LinkedIn, and then I can choose a color for the text, and I'm just going to change that to blue, and you can see that's more in line with LinkedIn's color, so that's great. And now I want to select a different background just for this icon, the light bulb. So I'm going to copy that, paste it, and this time I'm just going to change the nth child to 3, and I'm going to change the color to whatever you want. I'm going to change it to gray. Okay. All right. And things are looking great. So that is it, everyone, for the second stage of our tutorial, developing our developer profile. And you can see it's a nice, easy looking, well laid out developer profile using the CSS tricks that we've learned thus far, as well as some HTML and using some tools and common tools that exist there on the internet, like lipsum.com, Font Awesome, and CDNs, as well as you can throw the code into the beautifier and you'll get a nice output that you can submit. Okay, all right. So this is the finished code lab. So please make sure you have your own name on the code lab and you're submitting this HTML file through the submission link. Okay, so I hope everyone has enjoyed this. Thank you very much for watching another video tutorial, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.